Hi, September 2019, Southeast Asia. San Francisco to Singapore, Singapore to Ubud, Ubud to Menno, Menno to Lombok, specifically Sekatong, the subject of this video. We arrived on Lombok at Pelabuhan Teluk Nare, rather than further north at the public harbor. This was by design, to skip the chaos and traffic at the larger port. To learn more about how and why we chose the routes we did, you can watch the Gili Menno video. It's funny how easy it is for even a naturally guarded and careful person like me to fall into complacency. By the time we arrived in Lombok, we were on day 8 of our trip, and it had been a week of wonderful, cheerful, helpful, smiling, welcoming, friendly people. Our driver on Lombok was Dan, uncle to our friend Nurul from Menno, who had provided me with a photo, so I knew exactly what Dan looked like. Yet, the moment a friendly fellow, who clearly was not Dan, offered to carry my backpack, I handed it over without a thought. No sooner has I let go of the strap than I come to my senses and ask for it back. It's okay, the guy kept saying. No, really, I'd like it back, please. It's okay. He was being exceedingly polite and wasn't running away or anything like that. I'm not suggesting that he was trying to steal it. More than likely, he, 1, just wanted a tip for carrying it to the parking lot, which is a bit of a hike from the harbor. 2, he was a driver himself and leading us to his car in the hopes that we would hire him. Or 3, he worked for a driver and got paid for bringing passengers. Either way, it didn't matter. We had already booked our ride with Dan. I didn't want this guy getting pissy when I took my bag back and got into someone else's car. I was running scenarios in my head while still trying to retrieve my bag. And that's when Dan arrived, astride a white steed, the sun glinting off his polished armor. He was shaking his head and waggling his finger at the guy, rattling off what was clearly a directive in Bahasa. The guy handed Dan my backpack with a smile and a shrug as if to say, it's worth a try. Dan then greeted us, sparing me any rebuke for giving my bag to a stranger, and we followed him to the car. The drive from the harbor to our lodgings at Krishna Bungalows in Sekatong is just under 50 miles, and takes about 2 hours. Quick tip about hiring private drivers while traveling. Their default position is generally going to be just to drive you from point A to point B. However, they rely mostly on word-of-mouth referrals, and they know the area better than almost anyone. So if you're not in a hurry and you want to stop for photos, take in the view, do some shopping, just let your driver know. Not only will they stop, they'll probably even make suggestions. This is what happened as we were climbing away from the harbor. I asked Dan to stop so I could get a photo looking back towards the Gilis. He replied that yes, he would stop, but there was a better spot just up the road. And he was right. If you've been following the series up to this point, what I'm about to say will be a bit redundant, and I apologize for that. But I need to offer the disclaimer for the rest of the class. So
Bear with. Back.
If you're wondering why I'm not now wowing you with a cinematic montage of the drive to Sekatong, well, we don't travel to make videos. We make videos of our travels. So there are times when the cameras are put away to just take in the moment or deal with logistics. Besides, if you've seen one shot out the window of a moving car, you've pretty much seen them all. And there is much better, more engaging, and I think more entertaining footage on the roads of Lombok coming up in a bit. So for the time being, let's just jump to our arrival at Krishna Bungalows. Sekatong is this peninsula that juts westward at the southwestern corner of Lombok, and Krishna Bungalows is plunked right here on the coast, just south of another set of Gilis. That is our main reason for staying here. We wanted to do some more snorkeling. We arrived mid-afternoon, and check-in was easy peasy since everything had been reserved and confirmed ahead of time on Booking.com. Now, you'll hear me mention that site a lot during these videos. They are not sponsoring us. If they were, I would tell you. The truth is, we've tried just about all of the travel sites out there, and so far, Booking.com consistently meets our needs better than the others. If that changes, we'll let you know. But hey, about that brand deal, if you're listening, Booking. If you're interested in a video detailing how we plan our trips, let us know in the comments below. It is quite a process. For example, as I'm filming this, we're simultaneously planning 3 trips. The first 2 are quick little 1-week jaunts, whereas that third one will be more like the trip that we're documenting right here, longer duration and further from home. As I did upon our arrival on Gili Meno, I documented our commute from the water to our bungalow at Krishna. This time, however, we didn't have to move 5 minutes later. So I guess might as well be a tradition, right? Walking to our each new place we get to, show you the commute or whatever. So we just got to Lombok, to Krishna bungalows where we're staying, and behind me are the southern Gilis. We just came from the northern Gilis, now we're at the southern Gilis, and right on the shore here, so walk up a few steps here. And here we are, we're home. This is very typical of the type of accommodations we stay in when we travel. It's nice, it's elegant, clean, and well taken care of, but it's also simple and relatively Spartan. If memory serves, we paid around $25 a night in Krishna. The main area of the bungalow is just one room, with a bed and usually some type of furniture to put your clothes in. Occasionally, there's a TV and/or Wi-Fi. In the case of Krishna, we had both. I don't think we ever turned on the TV, but we did use the Wi-Fi for social media and to check in with family. Keep in mind where we're talking about, though. This isn't exactly broadband access here. You're not going to be streaming any games. Krishna also had hot water and air conditioning. Keep in mind, though, that the hot water is often just heated by the sun in tanks on the roof, so it's not exactly like on-demand hot water like you have at home. Then there's the bathroom. And again, this is a great example of what you'll find in many parts of the world. It's just one room containing a sink, shower, and a toilet with a drain in the floor. Next to the toilet is what I've come to lovingly refer to as a Bali bidet. It's just a kitchen sink sprayer that's hooked up to the water supply for the toilet. It's very simple, but very effective, and it's there for a very good reason. There is no municipal sewer here. In truth, sewers are pretty rare outside of urban areas anywhere in the world, so everything is on septic tanks. Septic tanks aren't designed to handle the astounding amounts of paper that people are prone to flushing down the loo. Many places when you travel don't even supply bog roll, so be advised and stash some in your day bag when traveling abroad. The Bali bidet process is simple enough. You do your business, then you take the sprayer in hand and aim it toward the area to be cleaned. Admittedly, this takes a bit of practice to perfect, and you give your undercarriage a good blast. This effectively removes any residue, so all that is left is to dry yourself using very little paper, which then gets disposed of in the trash bin rather than down the toilet. Now, if this sounds awkward to you, I have 2 quick points. First, part of traveling is learning how to step outside your comfort zone. And second, and possibly more important, causing a blockage in the septic system and having sewage back up into your bathroom would be decidedly more awkward, especially when the plumber discovers the offending wad of paper that you flushed. Of the 5 places we stayed on this trip, Krishna had by far the most extensive menu, with everything from chicken curry and seafood soup which we ordered for dinner that first day, to pizza, burgers, and banana splits. Now, when we travel, we avoid going out and about with plastic bottles, choosing instead to take our hydro flasks with us. However, we usually need to first buy bottled water to put into the flasks. And we were doing exactly that at Krishna when the manager took note of what we were doing. Before I could open the first bottle, he ran over, stopped me, and took our flask to the kitchen, where they had 5-gallon bottles of water that they used for cooking and making ice. He filled our flasks for free and returned the money we had spent on the water, just to thank us for not using plastic. As with much of the world, plastic is ubiquitous in Indonesia because it can be made into so many things for so little money, like bottles and bags, which inevitably muck up the environment in one way or another. Something as simple as carrying your own canteen is often recognized and appreciated by the locals. I can tell you, as someone who lives in a beach town, the thing we hate the most about tourists is the way they disrespect our beaches, parks, bays, and ocean with their trash. And honestly, water in a hydro flask stays cold longer and tastes better, so it's a win-win. We were only in Sekatong for 2 days, but we didn't pay for water again while we were there. Alas, I couldn't think of a way to swing the same deal for beer. Anyway, after dinner, we hung out on the balcony and watched the moon rise over Lombok before heading to bed. In the morning, we had what had by this point become our standard Indonesian breakfast: egg sandwiches with fresh fruit, coffee for me, tea for Wendy. We had booked our trip to Gili Nangu for 11 a.m., and since we were only going to one island and had our own gear, the cost was 100,000 rupiah per person, which is just under $7 US, a bit more than €6 per person. The boat ride takes 20 to 30 minutes. Stepping off the boat at Gili Nangu, you pass under this archway, which says, "Welcome to the Gidanada Tourism-Based Marine Conservation Area." Reminds me of our own Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary. There are bungalows and cottages on the island, as well as a restaurant, and the Marine Police also have an office here, but it was locked and empty when we were there. Thankfully, there is also a public toilet not far from the beach. At this point, you're probably wondering, what was the snorkeling like, right? Well, let's check it out. When we first got into the water, it was pretty crowded, and most of the people seem to be wearing flotation devices of one kind or another, which always makes me a little nervous. We hung out away from the crowds for probably the first hour or so, but finally curiosity got the best of Wendy. She had noticed that the main cluster of people was always in the same spot. Even as people came and went, they all tended to hang out right there. Once she'd had a look, she came to where I was resting on the beach saying, "I think you're going to want to see this." Of course, she wouldn't tell me what it was, so we swam out and I started exploring this new area. The crowds had cleared out by this point, so we had it mostly to ourselves. And now the bottom drops off pretty steeply, and this is where they've put in more and larger artificial reefs to rebuild the ecosystem. In the deeper areas, there's also larger fish cruising around. But it took a while before I stumbled upon what everyone was so keen to see. Check it out. Mesmerizing, isn't it? It's one of those things that you can't take your eyes off of. I've been feeling kind of over snorkeling for the day until this moment. Now I was reinvigorated and wanted to keep exploring. In that vein, I'm going to shut up right now and just show you some of what we experienced in the water that day. Enjoy. Our boat pilot didn't hang about while we were playing in the water. I assume he had other guests to ferry from island to island. It was not like we were alone, though. There were plenty of other guides and boats. If we had needed any help or a ride back to Lombok on short notice, no doubt someone would have stepped up. He got back around 3, as though he'd read our minds. We had had about our fill of snorkeling for the day and were getting hungry. So we hopped in and took the ride back. The view of Lombok on the ride back shows the size and verticality of the island, especially in comparison to the Gillies. And along with something you see a lot of in Indonesia, fire and smoke. See, when you don't have regular garbage pickup, there are only so many ways of disposing of trash and debris. Most of the time, what is burning is organic material and other rubbish, but on occasion, you can tell that there's also plastic and other inorganic material in the fire. Another reason to do your part in limiting the amount of plastic in the environment. Wendy and I actually have an idea for a way to lessen plastics, support marine conservation efforts, and give travelers a unique souvenir of their trip. But I'll tell you about that later. Our favorite spot when out of the water was this bale between our bungalow and the cute little swimming pool. An excellent place to relax and enjoy the company, the view, and the sound of waves lapping the shore. I spent nearly an hour that evening watching this fisherman setting his net. He first staked one end of it into the ground and then walked, which is what he's doing here, in a great big arc. I don't know if he closed the circle, I don't know how long he left the net in place, but I enjoyed watching him work. Which brings to mind one of the things that most struck me about our time in Southeast Asia, particularly in Indonesia. It might be the thing I shared with more people than anything else, and that is how friendly, happy, and content most of the people seem to be. Everyone seems to have a permanent smile on their face, and I don't just mean the hospitality staff, whose job it is to be happy and healthful in the face of inconsiderate tourists. I mean just the average citizen, farmer, fisherman, shopkeeper. Watch the faces of people coming the other way in traffic, and most of them will have a smile on their face, for no apparent reason other than they live in this amazing part of the world. I made a promise back in the Ubud video when I was describing our first car ride on Bali. I said something like, people tend to think of traffic here as hectic and chaotic, but if you pay attention, it's actually not so bad. The best way to describe road etiquette here is that each lane is actually 3 lanes, or 2.5, I guess. The far left of the lane, now remember they drive on the left here, just inside the white line is basically the slow lane, first couple of feet. This is where the more timid scooter riders or noobs like me live. The center of the lane is for faster scooters and motorcycles. Obviously, cars, vans, and trucks use pretty much the whole lane, but this is also where the half lane comes into play. The center of the road is kind of like no man's land, or a shared space. The larger, faster vehicles will often just drive down the center of the road while passing scooters and such, as long as obviously there's no oncoming traffic of similar size. You'll also see larger, slower vehicles like this truck using their turn indicators to let oncoming traffic know that someone is passing, or to signal to a vehicle behind that the coast is clear to overtake. It's all very polite and civilized once you see how it works. I think one of the things that puts visitors off at first is how often drivers use their horn. But again, that just comes down to context. More often than not, the horn is just a friendly tap on the shoulder, letting you know that you're about to be overtaken. It's like cyclists and runners who call out, "On your left," to pedestrians before they pass. I'll show you a few examples. If you watched the Gili Meno video, you'll remember that Wendy was suffering from some gastrointestinal problems. Well, that was still an ongoing issue in Sekatong as well. So, along with wanting to explore a bit, I also had to venture out to find yogurt. So I rented a scooter from the garage next door for 100,000 rupiah a day. Again, it's about $7, including this badass ping pong ball of a helmet that they threw in. Sweet. We didn't have a fridge in the bungalow, so I had to make a couple of yogurt runs. When I did, I donned the GoPro chest rig. The closest I've ever come to wearing a bra, which was interesting. I put together a little compilation to give you an idea of what it's like to cruise the main coast road at this corner of Lombok.
Hello, how are you?
Good, you?
Good.
So, while the roads on Bali were a bit too congested and confusing for us to feel comfortable driving ourselves on our first visit, I found Lombok, at least this little corner of it, to be easy and fun to explore. My only regret is that we didn't have more time. It was a bit of a whirlwind, actually. We arrived, had dinner, slept, got up, went snorkeling, rested and drove, ate again, slept again, checked out, and went to the airport. We used Krishna's shuttle to the airport, which was probably the most expensive single cost on Lombok for us. I think it was around $50. I apologize for being a bit flaky on some of the costs here. I try to stay on top of those details. It's just that it's been a minute since we were there, like almost 3 years, and I seem to have misplaced some of my notes. Here's the thing, though. Daily expenses and incidental costs are not the issue when traveling to this part of the world from the U.S. Getting there is the hardest, by which I mean most expensive, part by far. Once you're there, it is crazy affordable. So the most important aspect of your budgeting strategy should be airfare and scheduling. For example, we went in September, right after the end of tourist season, but before rainy season really kicks in. Crowds are slightly smaller, the weather isn't quite as hot, and the rates for lodging are a bit lower. If you want to learn more about our strategies for airfare and how we scheduled this entire trip, check out our Singapore video, which is coming up next. We bookended the trip there, which is why I've saved it for last rather than doing 2 separate Singapore videos. So make sure to subscribe, tick the notification bell so you don't miss that one. Finally, I alluded earlier to an idea that we had during our stay at Krishna, especially after our host being so thankful for us using flasks instead of plastic bottles. We've been thinking that it would be really cool to try and swing some sort of deal with a manufacturer. It doesn't have to be Hydro Flask, it's just the first company we thought of since we already use their product. If we can get enough people behind the idea through crowdfunding maybe we could get a great deal on flasks, or even a donation for the cause. We could then provide flasks to different hospitality providers, starting with some of the places we stayed in Indonesia, free of charge to them, and then they sell them to guests. Be even better if we could get logo decals for them. Proceeds from the sale of the flasks would then be donated to different charities in the area where the flask is sold. As an example, the Turtle Sanctuary on Gili Meno. The local environment gets a little cleaner, charities get an influx of cash, the manufacturer scores some philanthropy points, and the visitor gets a useful souvenir and a great story from their trip. I don't know. We think it could work. What do you guys think? That's it for this one. I'll leave you with a quote from Mark Twain that speaks to reasons for getting out and experiencing the world. Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts. Broad, wholesome, charitable views of men and things cannot be acquired by vegetating in one little corner of the earth all one's lifetime. See you in the next one.